As a driver, health is one of the big drivers. And it's probably, I think this is the most interesting, attractive area for farmers in the future. Because consumers will pay for health. For myself, for my pets, we will pay. And we're getting older and we don't like it. And so we're willing to pay a fair amount to actually stay as young and healthy as we possibly can. And so that's on the one side. On the other side, we've got a lot of research looking at the relationship between food and health. And almost every day, some new stuff comes out that says, you know, like yesterday, I think it was, if you don't want Alzheimer's, don't eat so much sugar and try and stay away from too many saturated fats. So that was some relatively new research, and it will change the way people consume. So we need to think about that. Michelle Obama, standing in front of Bill Simon, the CEO of Walmart, pledging sort of Walmart's pledge on food and health. They're going to try and help the US population be healthy through their food practices. Some things are really good, trying to get stores, small stores, into the middle of the consumer market, urban markets, the basically food desert areas. Other things are a little frightening, especially to farmers. We're going to cut $1 billion a year out of the cost of fruits and vegetables. The produce guys that I work with, not that happy to hear stuff like that coming from Walmart. But Walmart's view of the world isn't, I'm going to cut that $1 billion by beating down your price $1 billion. Their view is, I'm going to try and figure out how to waste a whole lot less of your product. I'm going to figure out how to move that product faster through the system at lower cost. And hopefully, I can save that whole $1 billion, not by beating on your price, but by actually just cost savings. I'll work with you to figure out how to save costs. They also are going to expect you to save costs and reduce your costs, so ultimately you're going to see a price decrease to some extent. But they also work very much on that side. So, and we've been doing a lot of work and thinking lately about, well, how do we integrate food and health policy with food policy? And so we've actually started to get and work more with some of the public health type people, so they at least understand the industry and understand that you actually need to have a strong economic base, so you need to have a strong farm base, strong food company base, to actually be able to build a good, healthy food system. We did some looking at some particular examples. We looked at DHA, milk, wild blueberries, and pulse crop. Very different products, and when we were looking at the case studies, very different results in terms of what happened. Just the things that showed up for us in terms of food and health is, if you think about things that create benefits to society, probably health and nutrition research, some benefits to the industry, lots of benefits to consumers. That's an important piece. Investing in production type research is really important. Regulation was a significant disincentive in Canada, and it is forcing people to go to other parts of the world, and so that's one of the things that we want to address in the future. Marketing and messaging benefits both. On the producer side, being able to tell people about how healthy your product is increases sales. Having articles written about industries increases sales. On the consumer side, anything they can find out that actually helps them understand the benefits helps them buy more of those products. So all of those things. We're also seeing product formulation, but we haven't seen any huge benefits yet. The kind of stuff Mark was talking about in terms of reformulation, that is, and stealthy reductions, that's sort of going to happen more over the next decade. I think you're going to see a lot of changes in the way we produce products and the ingredients in those products that will make them healthier. And so that's more an area for the future. Health sells, there's no doubt health sells. It sells all over the world. It is one way to flog your products, but first they have to be backed up by research, and you always need to keep the messaging. Consumers were really forgetful, and so you tell us something 3 times, we'll remember for a little while, and then gradually we forget it. And so you need to keep reinforcing that. And if you can find good research, new research, that helps a lot. Interestingly, the pulse one was a really good example of healthy products have to fit into consumer living and eating habits. How many people in this room, if you're given a bag of navy beans or chickpeas, would go home and make something really easy, really fast? 2, yeah. I'm in the other crowd. I'm in the crowd that I know these are really healthy, and this bag in my cupboard is just full of health, and it's been there for a year and a half because I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And whereas blueberries, every morning I pull some out of the freezer, dump them in the thing, microwave them, and then throw my cereal on top. So this whole, what do you do to make it easy? So getting it in ingredients makes a lot of sense, but you have to recognize that's where your product is, and this is what you have to do to actually get it out there. Lots of messaging, health messaging. These are just sort of, that's the graph just showing how much products that have health messaging increase. Interestingly enough, though, I was just down, we had a big food trade show in Toronto in mid-May called Ciel. And I walked around that show and I thought, whoa, the economy must be better, because what I really see is indulgence. Products that are really good, that are expensive, that will make me fatter but make me feel good. Now I wasn't sure why that was happening, because I'd gone to one a couple years earlier and everything was health, organic, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. So I'll be curious to see. Lots of messaging. We send too many messages. And there are some really neat systems come in. There's one of those states called Newville where you get a score out of 100 on the product, and they say, these are all the good things in the product, these are all the bad things in the product, and they sort of put it through their little black box and say, this type of soup scores 30, this type of soup scores 50, and it's a way of comparing sort of different products sort of in the same category to get slightly different. But I think something like that, we will settle on something that's a little more useful that's like that, because heart and stroke, that's useful, but if you start to put kidney foundation and all kinds of other things on, all of a sudden you get a package that's got a whole lot of space. How many people read labels? That's good, that's good. A few years ago, it would have been a really small percent. How many people started reading labels a lot in the last few years? Yeah, I mean, we are changing. We are changing, and we're going to continue to change, and that will influence the way we shop. One of the interesting ones that's happening now is this whole idea of you're an individual, you have your own genome, and we can actually start to think about a diet that is optimal for you. And that will come in the future. We will see apps for that. It will go on your cell phone. You'll have your genome done. There are ones you can get. Right now you can get sort of sets of about 5 genetic tests. Not based on a huge science, but this will be one of the areas in the future. It's not probably going to make a major change in the way consumers act in the next decade, but I think it will probably by the following. Interesting, we had a food and health workshop at Ivey. We have these policy workshops every once in a while where we invitation only, senior government, business people, we bring them all into the room to talk about issues. So we brought them in to talk about food and health. Lots of people from public health agency had never ever sat in a room with anybody from agriculture or any food companies. And it was very interesting. The discussions were pretty good, and ultimately everybody in the room practically said, I want to find something easy to do out of this conference. I want something relatively. They said, what we really need is a national food strategy. We need a national food strategy that actually addresses both health and the industry. And so, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture is working on that now. The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is working on that. So a lot of that's happening. This is a slightly old version of that. It looks a little better this year. But this is the picture we typically show of farm income, and which is the whole aggregate farm income. And you can see how much government payments are in there compared to the market. This year it looks a little better. Last year will look a lot better. The data's not out on that. But basically, there are a couple of things to think about in terms of the industry. And one of the trends that we are seeing right now is that large farms, not surprisingly, make a whole lot more money than small farms. And so this is just sort of total revenue category, 10 to 100,000, 100 to $250,000, and the net income by that. And this is just grain farms. And so you can see the farms that are $2.5 million and up over on the far right-hand side. We're updating all this with the sort of most recent data right now. But you can see that some farms are making a whole lot of money. I think that was $800,000 for the top category, compared to some farms that aren't making a lot. So size matters in terms of revenue. So that's the income distribution. This is the size distribution. So half of our farms are sort of selling less than 100,000. Another 20% or so selling less than $250,000. We found about $250,000 a year, certainly in the Ontario context, tended to be where people started to get at least some more of their income from on-farm activities than off-farm activities. And so when you've got an income distribution look like this, and a size distribution that looks the opposite, you're going to have some political tension. And that's not going to go away. We're also seeing what you would expect, the people on the far side buying up smaller farms, and we're seeing a lot more growth. That does have implications. One thing that's important, the green is the other income, which is working at Horizon pet food manufacturing, for example, being able to find jobs in rural communities that allow people to farm as part of their life, but they don't have to make their whole living from it. And so practically, sort of 85 to 90% of the really small farms' income comes from off-farm income. That's an important thing, and we need to think about that. So the more we can do to get processing in rural communities, it actually helps farming as well as farming helps rural communities. In terms of assets, we can see the smaller farms are still pretty asset rich in terms of having close to $1 million. But large farms have millions and millions invested. Now, there are very few industries where somebody says, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to own every single asset that I use in that business. Farming and agriculture is one of the places where we end up wanting to own everything that we use. Most places would lease a facility, lease land, and so on. And so I think actually, we look at we're all carrying a fair amount of debt, not quite so much though, relative. And so when you think about that, you're going to start to see new business models come in. I don't know if you've heard about Bonifield. This is one of the types of investment vehicles. What Bonifield likes to do is they like to work with a farmer who they think is very smart, very progressive, and owns part of a farm, maybe 1,000 acres. But they need to be 5,000 acres, 10,000 acres, and they can't possibly afford the extra millions of dollars. And so what Bonifield is doing is has put together an investment fund that says, I'll work with Joe, who is a really good farmer, and he'll own his 1,000, or he and his wife will own his 1,000, and we'll buy some of the land close to him. Put together a 10,000 acre package. We'll lease it back to him. He'll run the operation, and then every year, if it went well for both of us that year, and he wants to renew, we'll renew another year. So it's a 5-year rolling type model. You're going to see that because we need millions of dollars to invest, and there are very few young farmers with millions of dollars. And so it's kind of scary, but it actually, from a business perspective, I think makes a certain amount of sense.